Hi guys, I'm Juliet and now I'm going to talk you about Norway's prison system. First, I'm going to tell you that I divided this session into 7 parts. The first one is conditions in jails. Here, let's take Halden Prison as an example. The first fact is that in this prison there are no bars in windows. Also, each prisoner has enough space into the jail. About recidivism, I have to tell you that Norway has the lowest rates in the world. It means that when a person comes to a jail and he or she goes out, this person never goes back to it. About ideology, and this is an very important point because the ideology is that prisoners are treated as human beings. This means that in jail there is rehabilitation but not punishment and not revenge.
To see how's the situation in Norway, take a look on the following video.
So we're here at Halden Prison, the world famous Halden Prison. Radically humane is what some people call it. It's comfortable, it's well appointed, it's peaceful, it's quiet. They treat the prisoners really well. We're going to go inside and find out why. I'm interested to know, what's the thinking behind Halden Prison? Why treat prisoners so well?
I think you could take that quite simple. I like to believe it. Who do you want for your neighbor? Do you want somebody who's treated well, maybe educated, maybe come out for work? Or do you want a neighbor who's been locked up for the last 10 years with no service? What kind of person is that? I would choose the first one.
So when you got here, what did you think?
When I came to Holland prison, I was pretty much shocked because of the whole prison system, the opportunities here, and the wide range of choices you can choose in order to become a more productive citizen when you come out.
So how do you treat prisoners well here?
We treat them as normal as possible, considering that you are in prison. The punishment from the Norwegian government is to be in prison. It's not a punishment inside the punishment. We treat them well, we educate them if they want to. We try to help them with to have a place to stay when they're finished, if they want to. So everything is going, if the inmates want to be helped, we try to help them.
Do you enjoy your work?
Very much. Yeah, I really like it. And what I like is that I have 1 or 2 inmates that I personally follow up very close.
What does being a chaplain in Halden involve?
Conversations, mostly conversations. I go among the prisoners in the areas where they work and study, and I can go to their cells, and we have short or long talks about life and their situation, and that's mainly what I do.
So Runar, describe what I'm looking at here.
This is a normal unit for the B and C section in Halden prison. Every unit with 10 or 12 inmates is a little bit different from the wings, has this one to be together at the afternoon, eat together, be social with each other.
An officer would always be here and eating with the inmates.
The officers eat with the inmates.
If the whole ethos in Halden is rehabilitation, how important is is your role and the role of officers like that in that rehabilitation process? In the fact that you're here and you're eating with them and you're just chatting with them, or you're knitting in the corner or guessing the year.
Yeah. Well, very often inmates starts talking criminal talk with each other, or the use of illegal substances, and we correct them. No, we don't want to hear that kind of talk here.
After I came inside here, and I started to recognize mechanisms, and I understand that if you don't give these persons opportunities, then you are more likely to destroy your community even further.
And I think compared to where we're lucky in people and here, people learn more. Yeah, they learn how to behave. They see how we talk, how we behave, how we go into situations where people get angry and we calm them down. So I think it's a learning basis all over.
About imprisonment rates, I have to tell you that Norway has the lowest rates in the world. And about corruptions, as all prisoners have good opportunities and good conditions in jails, they don't have to look or to corrupt their process. Based in a research project of Virgin University called The Social Cost of Incarceration, I took several conclusions to you. The first one is that after 5 years of conviction, there is a 27% lower risk that convicts who have been in prison have committed new crimes. The second conclusion is that for the 60% of inmates who had not been employed for the last 5 years preceding the conviction, the decline in criminal activity is bigger. And the last one is that the risk that they have committed new crime after 5 years was reduced to 46%. This means that in prison and this whole process has a job or work as the key. Now let's talk about Colombia, and the first aspect is conditions in jails.
A CNN video will help us to understand better the situation in Colombia. Let's see.
Chronic overcrowding plagues Colombia's prison system, and a prison fire in January has raised further concerns. The fire broke out when inmates clashed with guards at a jail along the country's Caribbean coast. 10 prisoners were killed and dozens injured. CCTV's Michelle Begay reports from Bogotá on Colombia's search for answers.
Professor Miguel Ángel Beltrán spent 2 years in a Colombian prison before being acquitted of charges that he belonged to an insurgent group. While he awaited his trial in a maximum security facility, he learned firsthand about the country's problem-plagued prisons.
Prisons in Colombia are inhumane, where anyone who enters becomes dehumanized.
Colombia's prisons have come under scrutiny recently for their overcrowding. Officials say there are more than 120,000 inmates in jails designed to hold just 76,000. The lack of space and security risks make it difficult to carry out programs for rehabilitation and re-entry to society, the stated goal of the Colombian National Penitentiary and Prison Institute.
There isn't enough personnel, funding, nor security, so prisons have instead become a place for vices. Many drugs are consumed, and this frequently leads to addiction. There is also a lot of corruption amongst the guards that helps the internal trafficking of drugs.
This is completely different from the situation in Norway. The ideology in Colombia is completely different because it is based on punishment and revenge over rehabilitation.
Our team went to the Universidad Pedagógica Nacional to know what the students thought about prison system in Colombia. Let's see their answers.
So, Carlos, what do you think about Colombia's prison system?
I think the current Colombian prison system it's not fair. As some innocent people get into jail without no reason actually, and those who really committed a crime are left free. So I think it's not fair for those who are in jail right now and didn't commit any crime. Okay, I think Bogota is not the safest place in the world. However, I think that robbers and those people who try to kill you for taking your money or your stuff exist all over the world. So I I think police can do something, can try to send guards to specific places in order to make the city a safer place than before. However, I think they will always exist. The thieves and those people, I don't know, killer, murderers.
Charles, do you think it is fair that now in June there is do you think that that's fair with them?
Well, I don't think it's fair because we are all humans. However, if they committed a crime, I don't know, they will have to get used to it. Okay, I consider it that I would consider this. If the person commits a crime, the first time that person should be rehabilitated. If that person again commit a crime related to that thing that he did, in that case he should be punished. Try to make a deal with him to do not commit that crime again, but uh, if he wasn't able to do it, I think he should be punished. I think every single prisoner should have the same conditions of living, and money should not be a problem or an advantage for some who are capable to pay for a better lifestyle in jail.
But of course, in Colombia we have poor conditions, but also we have to know the difference between these two countries because the population in Norway it is 5 million people, but in Colombia is 49 million people. Taking into account both prison system and also the difference between both countries, I have several conclusions. The first one is that Colombia must improve its prison system. It's mandatory, but it is mainly based on people's perception of prisoners. Also, prisoners should be considered as human beings in order to incorporate them to society. The third one is that lifestyle conditions such as education, health, economy are demanding to reduce criminal rates. And also, even though in Norway prison system demands better condition, it is necessary to consider that Colombia has different conditions starting from the population and territory. And the last conclusion, and one of the most important ones, is that education is mandatory to reduce criminal rates in Colombia. Education should be reinforced in order to change the perception of criminals or to change criminals' perception of life. Also, job opportunities are important to reduce these rates. Thank you, that's all for today.
Hi guys, I'm Kiki and now I'm going to tell you some details about sex education in Italy. Then, I'm going to talk about the situation in Colombia. First, it is very important to mention that Italy is a very Catholic country, but due to the epidemic of sexually transmitted infections that affected several European countries, sex education became into something to treat at schools. Let's talk about the statistics. According to health authorities, the 55% of 14-year-old girls get pregnant or relied on the morning after pill, and only the 16% of Italian adolescents use condoms. These numbers indicate that in Italy there is a lack of sex education programs. Even though Italy doesn't have a national education policy or legal framework to treat sex in schools, in northern Italy a handbook was released. Its name was Il Amor, or in English, Hurrah Love. It was a simple but revolutionary guidebook on sex. It contained illustrations and case studies that directed kids and teens on safe sex. It was not directed to abstinence. This guidebook was released in schools where kids must be given the tools and the knowledge to face sex. Also, it treated a very important topic that went beyond preventing pregnancies. It taught them to respect their bodies. In southern Italy, the situation is different because this part of the country is very conservative and still sees sex as a taboo. Here, schools do not have sex programs. Here, the handbook was not accepted because it was directed to kids. Church has changed its mind about sex. Pope Francis supports sex education programs. He mentioned that sexuality is a marvelous gift that God donated to people. Teaching sex is a matter of love and affection, and it should be treated as such in schools. Here, we can find that the situation is starting to change from church to schools, but it is an important topic that should be reinforced and spread in the rest of the country to prevent sex diseases, violence, pregnancies, and of course to teach children to respect their bodies and to see sex as a serious thing. Now let's talk about Colombia. Here, the situation is very similar. Statistics mention that every year there are 150,000 pregnancies in teenagers from 15 to 19 years old. Also, there are 6,000 pregnancies in women under 14 years old. The situation corresponds to a lack of sex education in schools and in home. According to Los Andes University investigation, men start their sex life at 13 years old and women at 14 years old. Also, they found that people start their sex lives without protection or planning. There are several points of influencing people when it comes to sex education. The first one is communication into family. The second one is mass media perception of sex, and the last one is sex education in schools. In Colombia, these 3 points are failing. There is no communication in families. Mass media promote violence, and there are not enough programs in schools. In 1993, the Ley General de Educación proposed several programs directed to family planning, sex transmission diseases, and pregnancies. The problem was that these programs didn't consider kids' reality and didn't guide them to know their bodies and to use them in a responsible way. Another problem was that these programs didn't consider kids' ages and education starts too late. In 2016, the Ministerio de Educación Nacional released a guidebook that was designed to prevent violence in schools, pregnancies, and to strengthen sex education. Also, it contained a gender approach that became very controversial. This guidebook was attacked by conservative sectors, then that was why it had to be removed from schools. My partner Juliet interviewed 2 students from Universidad Pedagógica Nacional and asked them what they thought about sexual education in schools. Let's watch them.
Hi guys, today we are in the Universidad Pedagógica Nacional and we are going to interview 2 classmates. Their names are Juan Camilo and Oscar. So hi guys.
Hi, Juliet.
What are you studying?
Spanish and English, Korean.
Spanish and English as well.
So I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What do you think of sexual education in Colombia? These days, in your experience,
Well, I think that one of the issues that we have to solve as teachers is stop seeing sexual education as a taboo, as something that we cannot talk about, or something that education is not involved with. because we as teachers have like the power and the will to try to guide the students like to the right way in terms of avoid like illnesses and to make mistakes and to be myths, you know. Um, but most importantly, I think that in all the schools, we should have a subject focused on sexual education in terms of how the students could take care of their bodies and how they could take care of other people's hair as well. Because when you like have sensual encounters or intercourse, that involves that you have to be really aware of not only yourself but also the other person.
Well, I think that it's an issue actually because it's still a difficult topic to work. But I consider that we as a teacher, the thing we can do is try to guide students in order to, as Oscar was saying, avoid healing. I guess it's one of the most important things when we're talking about sexual education because you can prevent pregnancy and you can prevent illnesses when you know what is coming when you're having sex, right? And I think that's the most important thing about it, like preventing pregnancy and illness. However, I think that sexual education should be as well a way to start discovering human beings' bodies, right? Because we are still on the belief that the body is forbidden, and the students do not think so, right? So it's complicated for you as a teacher to have 40 students which have lots of hormones in their bodies and don't want to pay attention just because they are feeling their bodies. So they need to know what is going on with their bodies. So we can prevent illness and pregnancy and mistakes and other things that you're welcome.
So that's it for today. Thank you.
These different situations show that both countries, Colombia and Italy, have several problems when it comes to sex education. As both countries are Catholic and conservative, there are not enough space to promote programs that go beyond the biological part of sex. Even though both mass media and technology offer different points of access to sex, kids aren't being prepared to face it. Pornography is not a good way to learn about sex, but reality shows that kids' first access to sex is truth. It represents a problem of perspective as well. Families, schools, and the state should join in order to create a program that corresponds to kids' needs. Reality directed to face sex as a serious thing.